The National Desk, America's News Now.
The toxic smoke from Canada stretches further across the country and causes more problems. What you need to be aware of heading into the weekend.
It's very important that affected communities listen to the guidance of their state and local officials from this point forward to keep up to date on the air quality in real time.
And the Supreme Court shocks the political world how their decision could impact the makeup of the House.
You shouldn't view the court as a political institution trying to determine, okay, what's the result we want to reach and how do we get there? They applied neutral rules and the outcome is what it is.
And the latest unemployment numbers take an unforeseen turn, worrying data or a correctable report. Live from the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. We're glad you're with us. We start with breaking news. 20 states issued air quality alerts today as much of the eastern half of the United States is still impacted by toxic smoke from the wildfires in Quebec, Canada. You can still see all of that haze right here. That was in Washington, D.C. Today, more than 100 million Americans have been under an air quality index alert. Millions will remain under this alert throughout the night. According to this EPA map, right now, cities from Scranton to Richmond are in for the worst air quality, still above 150, meaning it's unhealthy to be outside. As you can see right here, parts of New York, which actually suffered the brunt of toxic air yesterday, remains in the unhealthy zone, as is much of Pennsylvania. The AQI hit as high as 425 in Philadelphia early this morning. Earlier today, the toxic cloud made its way over Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., which has dangerous levels near 250 this afternoon, and Charlottesville, Virginia. But the hope is the end is near for this air quality emergency. Meteorologist Marshall McPeak taking a look at what we can expect for the weekend.
Good news is on the horizon, and that is that the air quality should begin to improve very soon as the wind begins to change direction. So, still looking pretty awful on the East Coast, at least through tonight. But you notice how as this shifts going into Friday, some of it does improve a little bit up near Boston, and then even in the Carolinas, you're seeing some improvement there. We will see a little more through parts of the Midwest, and then it'll all start to move a little farther east on Saturday, improving even more on Sunday. What we're waiting for is for this low pressure center to finally move. It's been hovering in the Maine area for a couple of days now, almost for the week. Once that finally starts to move off the coast and out to the Atlantic, then we see the wind patterns begin to change, and that will help us move some of this smoke away from the East Coast, and we'll see an improvement to our air quality.
Marshall McPeak, thank you for that. Saw that haze during my ride to work this morning. Well, many Americans on the East Coast are dealing with a phenomenon that is rare to them. Senators from the West Coast pointed out in an Energy and Natural Resources hearing today that this is all too common on the other side of the country.
I think America is waking up, at least on the East Coast, to this problem, and we certainly have known all about it on the West Coast for some time now.
And for those of you who live on the East Coast, welcome to our air in the West. This is common. I don't remember a summer in Boise when we haven't had smoke.
And air travel, once again, has been heavily impacted. More than 3,500 flights have been delayed today, with nearly 100 canceled. By the end of yesterday, more than 150 flights were canceled and 5,800 were delayed. Already, 26 flights have been canceled for tomorrow. United Airlines is waiving fees and not charging extra for fare differences for many flights today and tomorrow, stemming from flight disruptions on the East Coast. Any passenger that has a flight that departs, lands, or passes through these 12 airports right here will not be charged extra for any changes they make to their itinerary. President Biden postponed a Pride Month celebration scheduled for tonight due to the Code Purple air quality alert in the Capitol. Thousands of guests had been invited for a White House picnic. The event was moved to this Saturday, but Biden did reveal new initiatives today to support the LGBTQ+ community. They include helping with resources to stop attacks, addressing youth mental health and homelessness, and working with schools to reduce book bans. Former President Donald Trump could soon face charges for his handling of classified documents. This week, we learned prosecutors working with special counsel Jack Smith informed Trump's legal team he is the target of their investigation. The National Desk, Atra El-Nashar, has the latest from Washington.
Former president and current presidential candidate Donald Trump gearing up for what could be another round of criminal charges. Almost a year after the FBI searched his Mar-a-Lago residence and found a trove of documents marked classified. Prosecutors looking into whether he mishandled the classified materials and if he obstructed government efforts to get them back.
We don't have any comment today.
Trump's lawyers being told he's the target of special counsel Jack Smith's investigation. It's not a guarantee he'll face charges, but legal experts point out that's often what follows. Trump says he's done nothing wrong, calling it election interference at a level never seen before, out with this new ad.
They already know he'll crush Biden. So like a pack of rabid wolves, they attack.
Some Republicans coming to his defense.
Mark my words, I believe Merrick Garland will indict Donald Trump. He wants to indict Donald Trump because he hates Donald Trump.
Others, including fellow Republican presidential candidates, taking aim at Trump.
Being under indictment is not good for a political candidate. The classified documents that he had, that we now know he had, were things that should have never left the White House.
Former Arkansas governor and presidential candidate Asa Hutchinson tweeting he should step aside and put the good of the country above his candidacy. Trump argues he's being unfairly targeted, unlike President Biden and former Vice President Pence, who also possessed classified materials. On Thursday, Biden was asked what he can say to convince Americans to trust the independence and fairness of the Justice Department.
I have never once, not one single time, suggested to the Justice Department what they should do or not do relative to bringing a charge or not bringing a charge.
Now, on Trump's comparisons to Biden's case, to Pence's case, legal experts, Didi, are quick to point out that there appears to be two key differences. The first being that Trump knew he was in possession of these classified materials, and the second is that he appears or may have obstructed the federal government's efforts to recover them.
Former Vice President Mike Pence just commented on former President Donald Trump's legal trouble. Atra, how is he weighing in?
Right, so it's clear that Pence is trying to walk a fine line. And during a CNN town hall last night, he said that Trump, nor himself, nor Biden should have ever been in possession of classified materials. But then he says an indictment would be too far. He says it would be divisive for the country. But then in the context of January 6th, Pence says that Trump should never be president again. So really, it seems trying to criticize him, but not go as far as to say something that might alienate his base, which Pence or any Republican candidate needs, just from a standpoint of numbers, of the volume of voters, needs to win that nomination, Didi.
All right, live in Washington, D.C., Atra El-Nashar, thank you so much.
Thanks.
The trial of former Parkland, Florida school resource officer Scott Peterson continued today. He was accused of failing to confront the gunman in the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history in 2018. Witnesses took the stand, including a 20-year-old who was shot in the foot. The prosecutor argued there was video evidence that Peterson did nothing to stop the shooter. Peterson's lawyer said the case was biased and his client did everything he could. The trial is expected to continue until August. The Supreme Court issued a ruling in favor of black voters in a congressional redistricting case in Alabama. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Brett Kavanaugh joined with the court's liberal justices in affirming a lower court ruling that Alabama's newly drawn congressional map may have violated the Voting Rights Act. Darwin Singleton in Alabama with a closer look, Darwin, at the implications in this state.
Well, this issue stems from a lawsuit that was filed back in 2020 that pointed out that out of 7 congressional districts in Alabama, only one was majority black, even though the census that year showed that 1 in every 4 Alabama citizens was indeed black. That, the plaintiff says, was a violation of the landmark 1965 Voting Rights Act. And in fact, several lower courts had agreed it was a violation. Well, today, the U.S. Supreme Court in a 5-4 vote agreed and settled the argument once and for all. Now, it didn't take long to hear reactions from both sides of the issue. Terry Sewell, she's Alabama's representative from the state's 7th congressional district and the state's only minority in Congress from Alabama, made a point to say this ruling isn't just about Alabama, but every state where minority populations are struggling to be heard.
It is about making sure that every American's voice in this democracy is heard. We know that fair representation matters. This decision just is not about Alabama, that the decision to take into account minority voter dilution as one is considering redistricting and the drawing of lines is a historic decision that will affect not just the state of Alabama, but will also affect North Carolina, Ohio, and I dare say a lot of the southern states where the African-American population is in excess of 25%, and there's only one majority-minority congressional district.
Now, of course, not everyone saw today's decision as a positive. Representative Jerry Carl from Mobile and Alabama's 1st Congressional District had this to say about the decision. I'm disappointed that we find ourselves redistricting once again and that 2 conservatives joined the liberal justices to create a majority and overrule Alabama's congressional map. I will always fight for South Alabama and will make sure our communities stay intact. So what happens next? Well, the state has to redraw its congressional map again, its congressional lines. And there's not a lot of time because the next congressional election is in 2024. That's just next year. So we reached out to Governor Kay Ivey here in Alabama if she was going to have a special session to do that. And she said she's still reviewing today's decision. That's all she has to say now.
All right.
In Mobile, Darwin Singleton reporting.
Darwin, thanks for staying on top of that. We know you'll keep us posted. In another decision handed out today, the Supreme Court sided with Jack Daniels in a unanimous decision. The ruling allows the whiskey company to continue its trademark dispute against a dog toy company with a toy that parodies the brand's bottle. Look right there at your screen, the image side to side there. But the narrow decision doesn't rule against parody like the lawyers for the alcohol distiller wanted. It just stated a trademark may not use another trademark and maintain First Amendment protections. Las Vegas police just wrapped up a 2-day sting where 14 people were arrested for luring a minor with a computer to engage in sex, according to authorities. Undercover agents posed as 13 and 14-year-olds. Officials say the adult suspects solicited them for sex, and a meeting was set up where they were taken into custody. Law enforcement is asking that anyone who may have been or knows of a victim to report the incident to the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. Today, California Governor Gavin Newsom proposed a 28th Amendment to the Constitution for gun safety. He says it would not remove the Second Amendment, but it would raise the federal minimum age to buy a gun from 18 to 21, require universal background checks, the list right here, establish a waiting period, and ban assault weapons. This measure not likely to pass Congress, but Newsom plans to try to hold an Article 5 convention of states, another way to ratify an amendment. Coming up next here on the National Desk, the House Oversight Chairman made a deal with the FBI about the bribery allegations against President Biden. We'll tell you what each side got and had to give up. Then a mystery takes a turn. What's next for Joran vandersloot? Then the latest state to make marijuana legal. We'll be back in 90 seconds. Breaking news, almost 24 teenagers were hurt after an elevated walkway collapse near a beach in Texas. 5 were flown to the hospital. None of the injuries were expected to be life-threatening, according to officials. The cause of the collapse is still being investigated. Instead of a hearing today, the House Oversight Committee was given full access to the whistleblower document alleging President Joe Biden took part in a bribery scheme when he was vice president. The FBI also handed over 2 additional documents for Oversight Chairman James Comer and Ranking Member Jamie Raskin to review this morning. In exchange for the documents, Chairman Comer scrapped plans for a hearing to hold Christopher Wray in contempt of Congress. Democrats and the Biden administration maintain the allegations are false. The prime suspect in the unsolved 2005 disappearance of American student Natalie Holloway is now in the U.S. Joran vandersloot will face extortion and wire fraud charges related to the Holloway case. He left Peru this morning, where he had been serving time for a 2010 murder. Holloway went missing on a high school graduation trip in Aruba and was last seen with a group that included vandersloot. He's being extradited to the U.S. temporarily for 1 year, possibly 2. He denies wrongdoing in this case. Jobless claims in the U.S. rose to their highest level since October 2021. According to the Labor Department, U.S. applications for jobless claims hit 261,000 for the week ending June 3rd, an increase of 28,000 from the previous week. Some analysts point to the holiday-shortened week as a reason for the high number. Weekly figures are often revised. While the U.S. abolished slavery more than 100 years ago, a few states' constitutions, including Ohio, still allow it as a form of punishment through a loophole. Clara Faith is in Dayton, Ohio, with lawmakers' efforts to ban the practice.
Representative Phil Plummer and Dontavius Jarrells are spearheading a proposed amendment that will prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude as punishment for crime with no exceptions. The first attempt with bipartisan support. Tom Hagel, a law professor at the University of Dayton, says this was historically a common way to punish inmates.
It was very common for penitentiaries to basically turn the inmates into slaves. In fact, they would even farm them out to farms and plantations and that, and have them work on it. And then the money would go to the penitentiary.
According to the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, inmates make around $1.10 an hour. But Hagel says if any states were to use inmates for profit, that will be a federal crime.
Because if they tried to enforce it today, to enslave somebody for punishment for a crime, that would clearly violate the United States Constitution.
In the 2022 midterm elections, 5 states, including Alabama, Louisiana, Oregon, Tennessee, and Vermont, voted to amend their constitutions. All states except Louisiana voted to change their law. Representative Willis Blackshear Jr., one of 30 co-sponsors of House Joint Resolution 2, says in part, quote, "There is never a circumstance in which slavery should be legal, and it's time that we update our Constitution to reflect that."
And marijuana's medicinal and recreational use is more regular in society as states legalize its use across the country. But a little talked about problem of using marijuana while on prescription medications has drastically spiked ER visits among one age group in particular. Spotlight on America's Chris Daniels has the numbers and the warning from doctors.
So that's 3-5, right?
This Seattle court is like a second home for Jackie Roberts.
Oh, I am really practicing being in the moment.
Her game and her life.
Yay! That's one of the longest rallies we've had.
Has had its share of smashing success.
Oh! I am 75, young. I used to say 70, but I'm proud of it because I am perpendicular and I'm moving.
Jackie attributes some of that to her ability to manage pain.
I always look for alternative methods, no opioids, too many side effects, but medical marijuana, cream, topicals, and even for bruises. 0-0 love all surface.
Roberts is part of perhaps the fastest growing demographic of cannabis connoisseurs, seniors.
We serve a lot of seniors who are looking for help with sleep and a lot of help with pain.
Hashtag Cannabis has made an effort to cater to boomers and beyond.
Cannabis extracts, cannabis vape cartridges, cannabis edibles, cannabis bath salts and bath bombs and lotions and topicals to rub on.
Nearly 24 states have legalized recreational marijuana. Many more have approved it for medicinal use only.
This is where seniors would come in.
But even in this brave, relatively new world of legalized marijuana, many seniors who have dabbled have found themselves crawling to an emergency room, thanks to higher concentrations of THC in some products than the weed of yesteryear.
This is a different animal.
New data this year from the Journal of American Geriatric Society showed 15% of adults over 65 had tried cannabis in the last 3 years for pain, arthritis, sleep, or anxiety. And researchers at the University of California, San Diego found ER visits skyrocketed for people in that age range who used marijuana, at just 20 per 100,000 in 2005 to 395 per 100,000 15 years later, an 1,800% increase.
There's a real risk here when combining it with certain medications.
Absolutely.
Dr. Leanna Harano works at Harborview Medical Center in the Department of Geriatric Services.
There's some concern about how cannabis interacts with blood thinners.
Cannabis can interact with a number of medications because of the specific enzyme in the liver that metabolizes the cannabis. It can elevate your heart rate, and sometimes people even mistake that for feeling like they're having a heart attack or they're dying, so it can be quite scary.
Harano and hashtag both agree for seniors to seek a doctor's advice before partaking.
Just go low and slow.
Way to go. 30, love.
As does Jackie.
Whoa! We smoked it, but now we wear it, and it works.
But she says anyone around her should heed the warnings from medical professionals and about her serve.
Yes!
Before playing any round. For Spotlight on America, I'm Chris Daniels.
Coming up, we'll take the pulse of America, and yet another state is legalizing marijuana. We'll be right back. We're taking the pulse of America, starting with a dramatic crash in Texas. Police have been investigating an incident in which they say a car crashed into a rock wall in El Paso. The car flipped up, slid on its side, look right here, landed back on the street facing traffic. A man was seen getting out of the car, walking away. As nearby restaurant employees rushed outside, officials could not immediately identify the driver.
Well, come the 4th of July, the sky won't be the only thing lighting up here in Maryland. Pot will become legal for all adults on July 1st, and small businesses wanting to get in on the cannabis industry and cannabis dispensaries like this one here in Rockville will have a chance now to apply for funding. The Maryland Department of Commerce is now offering grants and loans to help existing medical marijuana companies move into the state's adult-use cannabis market. The first round of funding includes grants of up to $25,000 for dispensary licensees and up to $50,000 for processor and grower licensees.
Yes. A Mill Creek woman in shock as she captured footage of an injured black bear in her driveway. Our Como crew spoke with her hours later and were rolling as the bear returned to the bird feeder in her front yard. The bear then walked past cars on a busy residential street and through yards.
It hopped over our fence, and then I just told my mother to get inside. We were looking at it through the window, and then I hopped over my neighbor's fence.
Como alerted Fish and Wildlife and South County Fire, who quickly warned neighbors.
The bear is in the area. It's best if maybe your parents go inside.
There are about 20,000 black bears across Washington. Fish and Wildlife officials say it's common to see them in green belts, forests, and even backyards in places like Snohomish County and eastern King County.
We've invaded their territory, so they're just out looking for something to eat.
But people were curious about this bear.
Because it was up and moving in the middle of the day, because it had likely been hit by a car and had an injury, it did create a little bit more attention.
The bear eventually moved to a wooded area to the relief of neighbors.
Pat Robertson, the Christian evangelist who founded the Christian Broadcasting Network in 1960 and gave commentary on the 700 Club for 60 years, died this morning at his home in Virginia, the network confirms. In 1988, he ran for the Republican nomination for president, a race ultimately won by George H.W. Bush. He was given the nickname Pat by his older brother, Willis Robertson Jr. Pat Robertson was 93 years old. That's going to do it for us tonight. Join us again at 10 Eastern for more on the National Desk.